Hey guys, this is Unsmooth, and I am back. I've been recording one shots. I have also been recording parts of series that I just don't want to upload because of how bad they've been. So hopefully you enjoy this one, because I'm definitely posting this one because I'm having help with the ship. And this is Izumi. And yes, this is an Arcanite's character, and the other half, Lilith, and it's not actually their names. And yes, these are not my pictures. These are just found randomly on the internet. Most of my images are. The only one that isn't was the Aether Charged Izumi. But, so this is going to be Glow Up, or Grow Up. And we start off with a 4-year-old Izumi at a training facility where she's getting her embryo tested, and everybody has an embryo. It manifests into the favorite items that they use, and if it's not close to their favorite items, then it shows up in a different way, or makes them change their habits drastically so these items become their favorite items. So Bakugo are going to get 2 leather fingerless gloves. Mina is going to get bracelets each wrist and each ankle. Hagakure is going to get a jacket, a hoodie with 2 strings to pull the hood closed. When she pulls it closed, she goes invisible. Yeah. And there's no mutation quirks except for mutation embryos. There are no quirks whatsoever except for mutation embryos. There's only embryos. Everybody has an embryo. So yeah. Except for Izumi. She has 2. So we have to start with another character first. We have to start with Sister Bear. And if you guys have watched Infinite Dendrogram, you know what embryos are, and you know who Brother Bear is. This is the female version of Brother Bear. Sister Bear. She's adept in school, martial arts. She's a child actor. She's done countless things. She's been running around the world, and everybody's 10. I'm going to just say everybody's 10. Izumi has gotten to know her, because Izumi's the only one who can actually fight with her, even though Izumi doesn't like fighting. But Izumi's embryo, and this is a weird embryo, it's a pair of wolf ears and a wolf tail that never disappear, but the effects disappear when Lilith comes out. You'll see who Lilith is later. Izumi, she has Atlas, and if you guys have seen Infinite Dendrogram, you'll remember who the Iron Giant is, who tries to trick Figaro into being attacked, which Figaro plays along and then chops him in half with a giant friggin' God Eater sword. That's a friggin' cool ass sword. But I've mashed those 2 together. So Lilith has Figaro's heart, literally, and Izumi has the Iron Giant's defense. So Izumi has 2 really synergistic embryos, and they work really well to each other until today. Izumi is going to school, and Bakugo, one of her friends, not her best friend, she doesn't have any best friends, except Bakugo, who treats her like an actual human sometimes because she has a mental illness. She's not able to express her emotions very well. And she doubts everything she does. She's mentally unstable. And this is where her mind's going to fracture. And you guys know how good I am at making fractured characters and developing their personalities. Just look at the Horror Neko, even though I don't want you to. Don't worry, it's not going that far. Because she's not that overpowered. So, she hasn't fought anybody. She doesn't know how to fight. She just knows how to take a hit and deal with it. She's never wanted to fight anybody, and she's never been violent towards anybody. But today, that's all going to change. Because the one day that Sister Bear is not stalking Izumi, yes, she's not stalking Izumi today, because Sister Bear has gotten into the habit of stalking Izumi and knowing where Izumi is at all times, because she's gotten used to being around Izumi and she doesn't want Izumi to leave. Because everybody that is around her normally gets injured and leaves her alone forever. But Izumi hasn't done that. So she wants to stay around Izumi, and they're both 10. So she doesn't know any better. And that's not going to be fixed anytime soon. If you guys know the manhwa advanced player in the tutorial tower, you'll know exactly where this is coming from. Because if you guys are up to date, he has 2 of these. Well, one's the Illuminati and then the other's the Imperial Guild in Japan. But they're both guild masters. So Izumi is at school, and Baku asks her to meet him in the school's basement so he can talk to her. And he's been developing his embryo ever since he was 4. He's got AP. He's got his ultimate howitzer. He has his ultimate skill howitzer, where he can send a giant explosive ball forwards at supersonic speed. And he can hold it for multiple seconds to make an howitzer impact. Which is a more controlled version of howitzer. So, after 10, 20, 30 minutes after school, Bakugo finally gets down there, and Izumi's been waiting for a little bit. And Izumi doesn't know, because she doesn't feel pain because of her embryo. And she didn't notice that her embryo was getting weaker and weaker. The acid burns on her hands. Because she never wears gloves. She never thought she needed to wear gloves. But she now has acid burns. Which, Mina, her embryo is acid, which cuts down on armor. So, her natural defenses from her embryo are cut down massively. And she's a little bit bigger than average. Because Iron Giant, she's got to be a little bit bigger than average. So, yeah. So, Izumi didn't know this, and this is the only way Bakugo is able to do this, because Bakugo has never been able to bully Izumi to where he feels pleasure out of it. Because he feels pleasure out of hurting people. Especially weaker people. So, weaker people that he thinks are going to be villains. Unless it's in Izumi's case, which then he just wants to hurt her. So, after a good thrashing from his AP shots, because she was in her own little world, wondering what he was asking her for, because he asked for a favor. And he would meet her down in the basement after school to discuss what this favor is. He starts barraging her with AP shots, which don't actually physically hurt her, but they mess up her insides. And Recovery Girl, who's been keeping an eye on her because Izumi's been fighting Sister Bear, and I was just talking to Shiro Senpai, and yes, I can thoroughly say that Shiro is the cinnamon roll of the server. Because if you guys want, I'll put a link to the Discord in the description, and hopefully you guys will join, because it's getting kind of non-crowded anymore. So yeah, I don't go on there very much anymore. I wish I could, but I've been having a lot of stuff in the real world going on, so I haven't had time. And when I do have time, I'm either talking about a what if, or I'm doing the collab with Shiro Senpai. And I'll never say Senpai again because it's just getting weird. So yeah, I suggest you guys go watch that collab. I'll see if I could put a link in the description. I've already rewatched it like 6 times. It's freaking good. But back on topic. Izumi has thoroughly been beaten up. She's now passed out on the ground, and Izumi hasn't come out of school yet. And normally Izumi waits there for Sister Bear, because Izumi is starting to like Sister Bear. And Sister Bear is now standing there because they've been walking home, and they walk in the same direction because Sister Bear has basically made Izumi her sister, because Izumi was at an orphanage, even though Sister Bear wants something different. Izumi is now in a coma, so Sister Bear calls 911 saying that she thinks that someone was abducted. And 911 has to respond to this, because they know that if she's saying that a certain person, Izumi, is not with her, then Izumi is definitely missing, because she's staying by Izumi's side almost 24/7, except for 1 day a week. And Izumi, even on that 1 day a week, still waits for her. So they look into it, and they check the school grounds, and they find that one door in the school is locked to them, and no one knows where the key is. So they get a warrant to bust down the door, because they're searching this premises first, just in case she was locked on school campus, and they find her in critical condition in the basement. And Suguchi Naomasa has a special embryo that allows him to detect traces of embryos. And he sees that 2 embryos, not her 2, because they've been keeping tabs on her, have been used a lot recently. Especially one of them. He doesn't know what they were doing, he just knows that one was used a lot. They use another embryo to see what her physical condition is, and they're like, yeah, she needs to go to the hospital now. And this person calls up a specific doctor who has another embryo of a needle that she always has near her. Recovery Girl! Yay! And Recovery Girl shows up being like, I know she gets beat up. Oh, wait, what? What happened? I could tell right now just by looking at her, this is not a normal injury. And they go, yeah, they bypassed her armor. And she goes, what? So Recovery Girl heals her. Her organs are now fixed. The only organ that was not touched was her heart. that was missing. Now her body is working perfectly fine. Her heart's still missing, but she's still pumping blood like her heart's there. And no, it wasn't the crystal lion-shaped heart. No, it actually looked like a crystal heart, a physical heart. A biological heart, not the crystal heart-shaped kind of diamond crystal thingy that Figaro had. No. So she's perfectly fine now, physically, except her heart's missing. But in her mind, her doubt, her anger, her fear, all of her negative emotions that she normally had a problem hiding, or she normally had a problem controlling, go completely wild and form another consciousness in her mind, which calls itself Lilith. And it takes over the embryo of her heart and has a slight subspace for the heart. The subspace does not affect her physically, except for takes away her heart and keeps the heart pumping blood. So they see this shield pendant on her neck. And this shield pendant was never there before. It just appeared. And they're like, okay, maybe her embryo finally took physical form, besides just her. And they see that her tail's gone. Just her ears are showing up now. Like, okay, this is getting weird. And this is a few days after. It's now been a full year. So there's still 3 years left before UA. I'm saying that there's 3 years left. Even though no. It's been a full year. So they'd be in 5th grade at my time. So that'd be... Nah, I'm not going to do grades. To start at 16, that'd be 5 years. There's still 5 years. Izumi's been in a coma for a whole year. Sister Bear has been freaking out. She's been skipping a few days. She's been going to the hospital constantly, checking up on Izumi. And one day, on her normal scheduled trip for the entire day at the hospital, she walks into the room and has a blood-curdling scream. And the doctors know that she would start yelling and crying. They've never heard her scream. So one of the security officers runs in thinking that someone's trying to take Izumi. He looks in the room and sees Izumi's gone. He goes through the cameras and sees that no one entered, but someone left. And Sister Bear tries to get into the security room. And he's like, I'm sorry, but I can't show you this. I can only show the police. And this person, who is a little shorter than Izumi, so they don't think it's Izumi, but it's Lilith, the other side of the coin, has white hair, no ears, but a tail. So he shows that to Naomasa. Naomasa looks into it and sees that a embryo was always active in this room. And then one turns off and one turns on. So he senses 2 different embryos, and that one turned off and one turned on. And he knew Izumi's embryos don't turn off. So he's like, okay, I'm getting really confused. So we're just going to have to do a manhunt. 3 years later, Izumi is, or no, not Izumi, Lilith is currently across the world in America. Actually, not in Japan. Lilith and Izumi can speak the same languages. Lilith and Izumi have the same experiences in fighting. They share the same memories for learning these skills, but they do not share the same memories yet. Izumi sees windows into Lilith's life. Lilith sees the entire story of Izumi's life because Lilith has been hiding. Or she thinks she's been hiding, but she wasn't actually created until after the incident. And the deep desire of Izumi was the wanting to fight. And Izumi, not wanting to fight before, now has desire, so she doesn't accept it. And the only way Izumi can get her second embryo is if she accepts the willingness and want to fight. That's important for later, but now not so important. Lilith has been tearing up the European, Asian, every country. From her way to America, down, across the ocean, up, over, back down. She's been trying to fight the strongest people possible. And she finally arrives in Hawaii. It's now 5 years in the future. She finally won her final fight, and she's now going for the big boss, she says. And that is getting into UA. The American branch of UA. Where Nezu, Aizawa, and everybody, and all the top heroes are. So, she sends a letter to Nezu, because she's good at finding people and finding information by just beating up everybody that she needs to. She gets a letter to Nezu and says that I will be going to your school and seeing if I can enter with your entrance exams, because I've heard that it's near impossible to get a perfect score. I want to get a perfect score. And Nezu just puts in the black market letter for Lilith, because it was signed to Lilith, not Izumi. And he addressed it to Lilith, and it gets to Lilith some freaking how. No one knows. And it says, sure thing. You will have to be hidden in UA for a while so we can take the test, and then you'll have to show up to the police to say, oh yeah, by the way, I'm at UA. And she goes, fine, I'll do that. So after 10, 20, 30 minutes of her writing a thesis on why she needs to be in UA and what she wants to do, she wrote in a specific code throughout the entire letter saying, I'm only half. I need help. My other half is sleeping, and I need to wake her. I don't know how. And Lilith doesn't even know that she wrote this code into it, because she just started writing a poem on how much she loves fighting. And the first letter of the entire, on each line of the poem, and I'm not going to make up a poem because it'd be too hard just to make a poem in the middle of this recording. No. The entire thing of each starting of each line for the poem makes up this code. And no one notices it except for Aizawa's husband. Yes, Aizawa's male. Gay ship, sorry. Sorry for people who don't like gay ships, but Mike notices it because Mike's a connoisseur of literature, arts, music, poems, haikus, anything literally adept, like poems, haikus, music. He loves it. and he sucks at haikus. So, I was just thinking of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Apollo sucks at haikus. But we go to the day of the UA entrance exams. She walks in and she goes, "I'm here." Sits down at her seat, and everybody looks at her because she's they're already in the middle of taking the written test. And Mike is currently reading the poem because he's been fascinated with this poem because it somehow drawn his attention and he doesn't know why. So in the middle of the test, she walks in and she says, "I'm here." And he's like, how is she hidden for so long if she wants to be seen? So he starts putting things together and he's overthinking everything. And finally it clicks. What if there's something hidden in this poem? So he runs to Aizawa, who's a literal code cracker in this AU. And he runs to Aizawa and says, "Aizawa!" And Aizawa yells out, "What?" And he goes, "There may be a code in this poem." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And Nezu goes, that could be very well what that's in the poem, because it's just random for her to start to send a poem and then not send any other poems with her other works, because all of her finely crafted letters between us were never this literally adept. It was just straight letter, getting straight to the point, and then all of a sudden a poem, and then back to straight letters. So Aizawa starts reading it and being like, "Oh, this is simple." And then he reads the code out, and Nezu goes, And Mike's overthinking solved a mystery that's been there for a long time. So Aizawa goes, let me call Naomasa. So we get back to Naomasa, who's currently sitting in his office, was reading a report on the status of Izumi, and after 6 years, he has no more leverage to keep this case open. So he currently has a case file on his desk, and he's hovering over it with a stamp, and this stamp says "deceased." And there's currently a bawling child in front of him who ran there immediately after the written test, because the next day is going to be the practical exam. And she's currently begging him to keep looking, and he's crying because he doesn't like seeing children cry. He doesn't like seeing anybody cry. And he's like, "I'm sorry, I have no more leverage. I can't keep this open." So she's bawling, and he's trying to comfort her while trying to hold it open. And he's been looking around the world. He's been doing everything for that one person that showed up that night. Aizawa finally rings him up, and he goes, "I had to take this. I'll be right back." And he closes the file, puts the stamp back on the ink pad, and he walks out of the room. And the door shuts. Aizawa hears the slight sobbing from the one person who was actually around Izumi a lot. And he goes, "So we have a new student at UA, and we're guaranteeing her into UA because she said she's getting perfect marks, which hasn't happened since friggin' All Might, but And All Might's embryo, All for One, or One for All. All for One is the other embryo. It's split to make One for All. Can be passed down. It's a medallion that they wear around their neck that All Might's been hiding underneath his hero costume. And he says that his hero costume is his embryo, because he's never changed the hero costume design, and it apparently never gets damaged, even though higher ups in the support corps know that it always gets damaged in his fights. Micro damages, and he sends it in to get it repaired to a specific person. Yeah, this is a specific person. Power loader! But now Masa, who also knows the secret of All Might, goes, "What is it?" And he goes, "Well, this student sent a message that she didn't even know she sent to us. We think we know who the culprit for the abduction of Izumi is." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, Izumi's in a coma, right?" And he goes, "She was." And he goes, "Well, she still is. We did a DNA check, and this is hours after the test. And we had her do a DNA check, and the DNA check, which was very fast, came back as Izumi. And she's claiming to be Lilith, but I think Izumi is actually passed out. And he goes, What? And he goes, and Aizawa says, "Well, I think that the embryos manifested their own personalities and helped her with her mental strain. Because if you've seen her file, she had mental illness ever since she was little." And he walks in and says, "Izumi's alive." And the crying that was going on, it was massive crying, stops. And he goes, "I can't say anything else for right now. But go to the test tomorrow, and I will contact you if anything new shows up." And he said this to her, and she goes, "Okay." And she walks out, and her eyes are puffy red. So he sits down in his chair, and he starts to cry, like small tears of happiness, because he doesn't have to see a little girl cry anymore. So he asks for the full details, and Aizawa says, "Sure." So Aizawa gives him the full details. I'm sorry for the glass impression. But Aizawa gives Naomasa the full details, and Naomasa goes, "Okay, I'll be there in 2-3 days." Next day is the entrance exams. And a perfect score would be 100 points. So this is going to be a long entrance exams. So Sister Bear has two things on. She has a limiter on, which limits the amount of power that her embryo can release. And after she gets exhausted, the limiter stops limiting and just allows her to go to sleep. And they have Lilith, who also has a limiter on, but makes her more exhausted faster. So we start the fight with her running in with a sword. She has a big sword in her hand. And this is her. If you guys know Arknights, you'll know who she is. So she has a massive sword in her hand, and she starts cutting through the robots perfectly. And after a while, after 30 minutes, the Zero Pointer shows up, gets blown away by Sister Bear, and Lilith feels outdone. So she starts to go harder. So her sword is on the verge of breaking, so she puts it in her subspace that she has for her embryos. And she starts running around, punching everything to bits. So after 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes later, she sees that she has 100 points. And she's been taught that 100 means 100% perfect score. So she starts celebrating. And then she sees that one person went to 101 points. And she goes, "Aw, crap. There's no limit to this. No wonder no one can get a perfect score." So she starts running around bashing robots and sees that the person who's beating her in points is now getting further and further ahead of her by a lot. So she looks for the person who's destroying robots at a rapid pace and asks for a fight. And there's no limit to who fights who. But whoever gets knocked out loses all their points. So Izumi, who has absolutely no damage on her, starts taking damage from Sister Bear. And, well, Sister Bear is not holding anything back. Because she thinks, if I get into UA, Izumi will come find me. If I get into UA, Izumi will come find me. If I get into UA, Izumi will come find me. That's all she's thinking. And then she blocks, just barely blocks, a punch that was straight for her jaw. And she has only ever barely blocked Izumi's punches. And she sees this girl that looks nothing like Izumi, because Izumi has wolf ears and black hair, not white. She starts thinking, oh, this person must be as good as Izumi. Maybe even better, because Izumi doesn't hurt very much and doesn't hit very hard. Well, after maybe 30, 40 more minutes of punch after punch after receiving another punch, she finally takes off her jacket, which is a weighted jacket. She takes off her gloves, which are weighted gloves. She takes off her kind of skirt, which is a weighted skirt. She takes off her shoes. She takes off everything that's on her except for her sports bra and her short shorts. This is America. Sports bra and short shorts are socially accepted somehow in schools. I don't know why. For working out, at least. Or at the most. So she immediately blitzes Sister Bear, and they both start punching each other. Sister Bear finally takes one punch, and she took off the limiter that's on her wrist, which limits her movement drastically, because it limits the amount of control she has over her embryo, which is her muscles. Her muscle fibers are her embryo. which is why she can have bear features. That's why I'm calling her Sister Bear. I completely forgot the name that Shiro gave her, which I agreed with, but I completely forgot it like 2 minutes after I heard it. So they punch each other, and Sister Bear, she dislocates her jaw. Her jaw shatters on the left side of it. She gets a fracture up her cheekbone, and through her eye socket starts to fracture. She gets a massive concussion, and a few of her vertebrae in her neck dislocate from one punch. She's not very durable, but she can deal a lot of damage. And yes, Bill, that's a lot of damage. So she is now on the ground, unconscious, but alive. She won't be able to eat for a few days. Lilith, who is badly beaten, her organs are messed up. Her bell has been rung a few times, which is her head. Her skull is fractured pretty much everywhere. Her bones are fractured. A few muscles of hers are pulled. And her heart is cracked. So her heart has 3 layers. Lilith layer, Izumi layer, and combined layer. Lilith's layer is the one that's showing up now. Izumi's layer is the one that looks like a normal human heart that no one notices because they're normally looking for a crystal heart. But on the inside of that normal heart is the combined layer, which is the golden lion heart that will show up when she's back to normal and not mentally broken. So, okay. She's currently knocked out on the ground. Buildings were knocked down. Lilith has lost a lot of blood. And her tail disappears. And her ears show up. And her hair starts to change back to black. Very, very slowly, but they're currently on the way to the medical ward in UA. A recovery girl heals up Lilith first because she's in more life-threatening condition. Then with the last of her strength, she realigns all the pieces to Sister Bear's jaw and then calls in a physician to wire her jaw together. Because if they don't, it's going to heal weird and she's not going to be able to eat anymore. So, almost done. She wakes up in her room, Sister Bear, and she tries to talk, but she can't. Aizawa puts a hand on her shoulder saying, "You've passed. It's been a few days, but you pass. Class starts tomorrow. Get some rest, and you won't be able to talk for a few months." She nods in understanding, and then she starts freaking out, and she tries to reach for a pad of paper, and he's like, calm down, and hands her a whiteboard and marker, because he knew that she was going to start freaking out. She goes, any progress on Izumi? And that's all she has to say, because everybody knows who she is, because she's a child actor, an idol, a martial arts master, because she's been doing every kind of martial art she possibly can since she's been little, and she's a prodigy. and she's one of the strongest people in the world. Sorry, she is the strongest person in the world. So he goes, I understand. I will tell you when we find her. And he's lying through his teeth, and he knows this, and so he's sad that he has to lie to her. With Izumi. Izumi wakes up and sits up like nothing happened. Now Masa asks, what is your name? And she goes, Izumi. And he goes, any surname? And she goes, no, I've been an orphan. And he goes, okay. And he's thinking, that checks out. And he goes, okay, what is your embryo? And she goes, I don't have one, I have two. And his eyes widen and go, okay, I'll be back. And I'll end it here, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, consider hitting that like button. And if you guys like my content, consider subscribing. I'm not linking in the description the Horror Neko series, so don't ask me to link it. If you guys want to go see it, go look it up yourself. And no, I am not relabeling it as Horror Neko for those people who have watched it. So don't worry. They will never find it unless they want to watch all my content, which means more ad time, more mid rolls. But if you like my content and you want to stay up to date, hit that bell button. And I can't wait for the next part of the collab, which, Shiro, I know you're currently listening to this. I can't wait. My schedule will be up in the air for uploading and recording. Currently waiting on Hollow for part 2 of this, because another person in the friends group is going to be very important. I'm gonna give you a summary of next episode of this. And no, I don't give summaries at the beginning because it's boring. A summary for next episode. Stalker returns. Friend finds out Stalker. Hero test. Izumi returns. And this may be a 3 or 4 part series. Acceptance of of thyself. Oh, and by the way, Todoroki has 2 embryo. Well, 1 embryo, but he only uses one side. Cocutus. The Porte de l'Enfer. And if you guys know that reference, good on you. You've seen Infinite Dendrogram. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, consider hitting that like button like I said earlier. If you guys like my content, consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification to stay up to date, because my schedule is kind of sporadic right now. So, yeah. Yeah. I'm into here. Talk to you guys later. Bye.